Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing with Excellence podcast. This is your holistic health expert, Kimberly Miller. And today I have two amazing guests with me today, Myra Lavorne and Marlene Turner. Some of you have recognized them from the International Wellness Team. I'm so grateful to have them. And the reason they're here today is because the topic is about when is it the right time to make a decision to move a loved one into a long-term care facility. And this is very near and dear to my heart. And it's something that I wanted to share with all of you to help clear up any concerns, questions, and also because I feel that everything that I typically go through in my career and my life has been to help me serve others. And I think that's what most of us go through. And Myra and Marlene were with me on this journey over the last 4 to 10 years. So between their personal professional expertise, their hearts, and between their experience with me, I thought they would be great to give some feedback and some input as I share the story and as I help others that are trying to make this decision. Myra, Marlene, thank you for being here.
Thanks for allowing us.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little recap because recently I've been doing a lot of travel to Egypt. And some people have asked me, where's your husband? Where's your husband? Now, some people know John's story, and it's on my website, so you can find the story of John's healing. I knew him for several years. He had a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. When we met, he was my client. And through that journey, we helped him heal like 90% of his symptoms. And then I didn't see him for a couple of years, or well, I shouldn't say a couple, it was several months. In that time, though, he was very comfortable and confident that he had healed MS, and he decided to make decisions that were opposite of healing, and his body crashed. So he went from extreme self-care to extreme overtraining, excess caffeine, excess drinking. And then sadly, he was hospitalized at the VA hospital in Tampa, Florida. And he basically had like a psychotic episode. And unfortunately, they thought the psychotic episode was just coming from lesions on the brain and an MS decline. And they gave him steroids and different medications. That didn't work. So then they gave him multiple antipsychotics. He was hospitalized for 100 days and became completely disabled. He was put into a long-term care facility in 2016 at 42 years of age. And then he remembered my business, my phone number, and he had the head of the facility call, who is also now a practitioner with Healing with Excellence, Alyssa Rawlings. He had her call to see if we could help. And at that time, the business name was Gimme. And so some family members that knew him that were also customers of Gimme came with me to meet with him. And I saw that he was being over-medicated. And to make a long story short, I became his health surrogate in 2016 as a client and a friend to save his life. And he promised me that if I could help him get out of the long-term care facility, that he would do anything that he had to heal. And so I got him to his house. He had a perfect home to live in, and I had a team of people from Gimme to help me help him heal. I thought I was going to have a lot of help from his church, from family, from my family. And unfortunately, most of it because of people's lives, busyness, or not even really understanding what it's like to caregive for someone in a crisis. Unfortunately, most of it ended up falling on me. Some Gimme clients were amazing. They donated multiple meals for literally over a year to help keep him alive. And we got him like 60 to 70% better. He reversed multiple symptoms. He got off all medications. He was on 10 medications. And then over a course of a year or two, I somehow fell in love with him. There was multiple things that happened that it was almost like something I had prayed for in certain things that I literally would have to write a book about it to explain why I was being led to him. And of course, many of you know, most of my training has had to be non-conventional. So I didn't take courses at that time with LMT or physical therapy school or nursing about boundaries. And so I just always followed my gut. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to move in with him. I'm going to help him heal and further, and we're going to have this amazing life, and he's going to be a miracle. I'm going to have this amazing marriage. And well, at that point, I wasn't thinking marriage. We were just going to live together and help each other. And then eventually we got married. Well, once we got married, something in his psyche changed. I was no longer his angel. I was now his wife, telling him what to do instead of helping him. And then the psyche was, oh, this woman's just going to take my money. She's going to tell me what to do. And again, to his defense, he really did have serious brain injuries that impacted his left frontal lobe when he was hospitalized at the VA. And so some of his decision-making and thoughts were coming from those brain injuries. Some were from his personality. And from my experience, anybody that goes through a major healing process, and again, some of you that have not dealt with this yet, this might not resonate with you, or it might not make sense, or it might sound airy-fairy. But anybody I've worked with that's been diagnosed with an incurable diagnosis or had a major catastrophic event, it's almost like God, the universe, whatever you believe in energy, wants them to purge their old self and evolve into who they're supposed to be, like a real renewing of the heart and mind. And it was like John was being given this second opportunity, this beautiful opportunity to have an amazing life if he chose to be opposite of who he used to be, like not as obsessed with things, materialism, not as judgy of other people, grateful for people, and showing gratitude for humans versus maybe being very particular. And every time he would start to move forward on that path, something would happen where he was given a choice. Do I make the God choice, or do I make the choice lesser than God? And sadly, he would always make the opposite choice. But I thought I could inspire him, love him, show him that gratitude and grace and giving, and not being materialistic, but more into loving people more than things and loving experiences more than things, was the best, in my mind, the best path to choose for healing. Because that's what happened with me with chronic Epstein-Barr virus. I had to change some of my perceptions of the world and of other people to have a true healing and my thoughts. Now, the reason I gave so much grace for him is because of the brain injuries and the multiple vaccines in the military and the things he thought the doctors were helping him with. I thought the brain injury was making him inept or incompetent to make these decisions. And I thought, if I had an injury happen to me that damaged my brain, and people knowing who I am in my heart, would I want my loved ones to give up on me because I could not physically make these choices anymore because of physiological changes in my brain? And I said, no. So I would always post these positive pictures of John on my phone to remind me who I was fighting for, because I knew these good parts about him. But many people also know that I have a disorder where I always see who people could be versus what they are. Now, again, Myra says that's my gift sometimes too, because that's how I've helped people heal, because I look at the light, not just the dark, and I look at what is right as we perfect the things we need to heal. But sometimes I give too much grace to the point of self-destruction. And, I'm sure there's past traumas that went into that where I didn't want to be abandoned, so I don't want to abandon somebody else. Well, anyway, every time we would get John to a certain level of healing, and he had the ability to make his own choices on whether to take the baton and continue to heal, he would make the opposite choice and crash again. So in 2020, had a serious decline from excessive use of CBD oil, which some of you have heard in other podcasts, but that CBD oil caused a psychotic episode, cannabis-induced psychosis, and then he has sodium-induced mania because his sodium dropped too low. Well, at that time when that happened, he turned against me and became violent. And I had to be careful, even though he was wheelchair bound, if I was close enough, he was extremely strong. And so he had to be hospitalized to be stabilized. Luckily, after several weeks, he remembered me as being the good person and didn't come after me. But when I've talked about this in the mental health course, when somebody does have a psychotic episode, they do tend to turn against the person they love the most, and that's the person they feel the most trust with. It's also the person that can reel them in if they're in a manic attempt and they don't want to be reeled in. So sometimes they turn against that angel, so to speak. And so you have to be very careful, especially John's 6 foot tall, over 200 pounds, ex-military. And again, always extremely fit and strong. So he was hospitalized. And at that time, I reached out to Marlene and Myra because they're kind of like my rocks. Now, Marlene, I don't know if you can remember it all back in 2020 when I called you and I was like crying and devastated. And you had had an extremely long marriage with a military man. So I was kind of looking for guidance and advice and on how not to give up, but also to make sure I didn't kill myself off or harm my 2 daughters, because my daughters and my mother were being impacted at that time. Do you remember those calls at all?
I do, because you kept trying to stay motivational for him, but it was just tearing you apart. I
Mm-hmm.
remember.
Yeah, and then trying to decide, I kept like praying for signs, because me, I cannot
Yes,
let go until I know that I've been obedient and did everything I was guided to.
right.
Now, at that same time, Myra, you came down for some courses, and you've worked with so many people in the transition process of leaving the physical realm into the spiritual realm or passing over through the hospice care, that I remember you even talked to John about what are his choices. Like, does he want to live or is he ready to go? Because every time he had a choice, it was like he was taking himself out. What was your perception when coming down to Florida and being around us or around me in that situation?
Well, I could definitely feel the stress in the family, which worried me. And I knew you were going above and beyond to support him. I did some work with him with belief change, and I feel like he was um, kind of divided. There was not cohesion in his brain. And so I was trying to do some belief change where you connect both sides of the brain. He responded well, but I still felt like he could flip. I felt like it wasn't solid. And so I was really concerned about him being able to follow your commands or follow what he needed to do. Even though he says he wants to, I just felt like it was not going to work. And I didn't feel at the time that he wanted to die. I didn't get that. But I did feel that he couldn't make the decisions of how to heal and be a positive part of the family. And that's what you and your girls and your mom needed. And I didn't feel like he could give you that. I felt like he was drawing from you instead of adding to what you had to offer. So
Yeah. No, it's interesting too. When you say that, I kind of accepted that from the beginning, that I would probably always be drew from. And if he didn't gain back certain capabilities, I accepted like there would never be like a special date or a gift or a birthday card or none of that stuff. I just at least expected some respect and safety, because at points he gave me all of that. But then the further, the longer we were married and the more comfortable he became, and the more I did, the less he did, and the more he expected. So he wanted me to completely leave my career and just take care of him and retire basically in my early 40s. And it was shocking to me because he knew how many people I helped to live, and I still had reduced my shifts down to like only 3 hours a day. I quit traveling to teach. I basically stopped all of who I was in acceptance that we were just going to live on this sanctuary at home and people would come visit us as needed. And then even if the world went to hell, we would have our sanctuary. Like I would make it feel like Costa Rica at the property and make it a healing retreat. So I was okay with that. But then our home became not so safe and not peaceful for me and not any nurturing. So it was just basically me being the physical therapist, the personal trainer, the nutritionist, the chef, the caregiver, the wife, the mom, the person bringing in the finances. Now, of course, he had a military check coming in, but again, all that money was going to pay for his care, because for him to stay stable, he needed 4 fully cooked, home cooked organic meals a day. So for 8 years, I cooked anywhere from 2 to 4 organic meals every single day and served him. Like he couldn't get to the kitchen table. But again, so as he would heal, when he had the opportunity to make a good choice. So let's say we got him back to, so at one point he was completely bedridden, couldn't go to the bathroom, couldn't go to the shower, couldn't transfer into the chair. I got him back to where he could do all of that. But when he had those choices and it was time to start walking again, because physically he could definitely have walked again and be self-sufficient, but mentally, I didn't know if there was enough brain injury that he either didn't want to physically do the work to go to walking, or if he could not physically do the work because of the brain injury. He was diagnosed eventually with something called abulia or adenomia that I'm sharing here because it's basically an injury to the brain that kills your intrinsic motivation. And so you can't push yourself to do it anymore. But sometimes if someone else pushes you to do it, you don't like that either, because then you don't know if they're helping you or nagging you. So I would say to him, okay, when I'm working a few hours or cleaning the house or cooking, I want you in the bed to like sit up at the edge of the bed while you're watching TV instead of laying there or instead of being in the chair. That way your core would work. Or there's some exercise that I've given to my other clients who are bedridden to like do something like called a quadruped, being on all fours to build their abdominal wall. And then what happens, they're doing the smaller work that they can do safely when I'm not there. And then I show up and take them to the advanced work. I even had, because and I'm sharing all these things because it's going to help someone else listening. Brooks Rehab in Jacksonville was one of the people that helped me help him get well enough to bring him back home after an injury in 2020. In 2020, that second time being hospitalized, I was told by every professional and every family member to leave him in long-term care. But Kim doesn't listen until Kim is exhausted what Kim believes needs to be exhausted. So Kim's like, no, Kim can do this. We could do this because I can always see what someone's capable of. Well, Brooks Rehab was my last chance approach during COVID. And we stayed there for 20 something days, and they helped me get him to a point that I could safely take care of him at home. And in that place, they gave him what's called an ACE cognitive exam. That exam was amazing because it helped me see how his brain was processing to where I didn't take things personal when I was delivering information to him, and then I could slow down. His brain, he did not like options. If you said these 3 options, he would get frustrated because he couldn't handle options. And this may be happening to one of your loved ones, to someone's listening. You could be trying to help and give options, and they're getting angry with you because their brain kind of gets like a clogged drain. It can take in a little bit of information, but if you give too much, it gets clogged, and then they just get overwhelmed, and they can't articulate that they're feeling overwhelmed. So instead, they typically get angry, or they shut down, or like throw something, or tell you to get the F away from them. And so when he had that ACE cognitive exam, it helped me realize what was truly happening to the brain. But anyway, after that, we got him home. And again, I was able to get him to like 80% better after months of bed rest and care. But when he could start doing his own things, he refused to do the things that would help him sustain his core strength. And if I would say to him, okay, if we don't do X, Y is going to happen. One, it would either be like I was calling out the negative, or he would think I was speaking negative over his life, or that I was harassing him, nagging him, telling him what to do like a wife. Well, so as the couple years went on, in 2023, he started having a little bit harder decline mentally. Like I could notice a few things that were kind of like a dementia. And again, you're going to have that if you're always staying in a bedroom. Like he had no interest at all unless I was taking us traveling. But when we would travel, every time getting in and out the wheelchair, getting him in and out, my back was starting to get injured. But I was working on it, because I always find an angle. But as a whole, he was starting to get a little bit of like dementia type symptoms. Then he started slipping more. So let's say I went to the grocery store to get some food. When he would go from bed to try to transfer into the wheelchair, he would slip off the edge and he'd be on the floor. And I wouldn't know he was on the floor till I came home. Trying to get a 6-foot tall man over 200 pounds from the floor to the bed was not easy. Now, I learned tricks to do it because of body mechanics and being in the fitness training world. But there was times that he would be so upset that he was on the floor that the more angry he would get, his whole nervous system would shut down, or he wouldn't be able to think clearly to help me help him and get him in the bed. Now, luckily, most of the times after like a waiting period, like I never ended up calling EMS. I did have to have some local people come by to help me one time, but most of the time I could get his upper body on the bed and then like heave ho him into bed the rest of the way. I found lots of tricks, but again, it was starting to take a huge physical toll on me, and then also getting more dangerous for him. Like he started to get a little bit more scraped up and different things happening that I was worried about his back because he had a previous disc herniation. So anyway, about this time, I found a neuropsychologist at the Tampa VA that was amazing. It's not easy to find a phenomenal physician, especially in the psych world, but this neuropsychologist was awesome. And I wanted to get a neuropsychological eval to see, is it possible? Like anybody listening that knows me knows that I don't believe in most diagnoses, and that I believe most things can be healed if that person makes the decision and has the competence and the ability and wants to heal. So when I took him to the neuropsychologist, I wanted to see what their viewpoint was. Like, is Kim just psychotic, or is there a way for this to heal? So when she did an interview with him, she explained to me that Kim, what's left of his brain is the very basic ability. He only has like basic recall left, that if you showed him 3 street names and you went back and you showed him the one street name, you showed him 3 street names, he'd probably be able to pick the one out of the 3, but he would never be able to say, oh, you told me Lemon Street. You'd have to show him the 3 streets. So she said, you need to understand like this brain injury. And then she explained the abulia again. And she said the main way to help that heal, if it could, the intrinsic motivation, is to have a set schedule every single day, a structure where you have like breakfast, lunch, dinner the same time. And then also like to have PTOT every day. Like for me, I would train him, but one, he didn't want me to just be his trainer. He wanted me to be his wife. When I would call in PTs to the house, it was always too generic. It wasn't, and they never believed his body could be better anyway. So they would just go through the motions, leave. So I hired a trainer for the house. None of that worked. So he would give effort for that trainer and then do nothing in everyday activity. So he didn't realize you can't just work out with a trainer and then 23 hours, sit and do nothing. You have to have your own intrinsic motivation, like even putting on his own shorts and shirts. He didn't want to do that some days because it was a little bit of struggle. But if you don't do that, your core shuts down, your balance shuts down. And talking to anybody here that's healing, any little thing you can do for yourself, putting on a sock, do it, because that helps you get back your abilities. So when we went to this neuropsychologist, she explained that he needed this structure. And she said, I learned from another person, the one that actually initially called me back in 2016, that he was in long-term care facility. She said, Kim, haven't you heard of those facilities that are VA state funded? They're like 5-star rated inpatient care. She said, there's 3 in the state of Florida. Have you heard of those? I'm like, no, everything I've seen has been like 2-star rating. I said, he's tried a couple facilities in the past, but they were horrible. So she said, Kim, I think you should check this out. So we looked at these facilities. There's one Baldomero Lopez in Land O'Lakes area, and then one Emory Bennett in Daytona that was closest to us. And he has family in Daytona. So we thought those 2 options, if that were ever a need, would be considered. So when I talked, the neuropsychologist said that that's the kind of facility he needs to go in for a while to see if he has everyday training and a structure, and where it's all veterans and they all know each other and he has community. Would his brain come back alive versus just sitting in the bedroom waiting for me to get off work every day, or me doing all of the tasks at a facility would do between the chef, the PT, the nurse? And to me, that was just normal. My whole life, I've done all the jobs. So I thought that was normal. And so I have an amazing client that is a retired psychiatrist from the VA that helps with veterans assimilating back into the real world. So because my own mental health would need to cope with him going into a facility, I talked to him also. He's like, Kim, remember when you were in Brooks Rehab and you had that whole team? How amazing it was and how he came back. He goes, you're trying to be the team and you're breaking. And he goes, and if you fall and you're not here, who's going to advocate for John? And then who's going to advocate for your children? And I was like, well, that makes sense. It was one of those things where you have to be a leader, and sometimes making the right decision is still a tough decision. It doesn't always feel good, right? So we met with that neuropsychologist, and she suggested that he go into the facility to see if he had this care every day, could it come back, or would he basically either mentally not be able to make that choice, or spiritually not make the choice to do the work, and he just stay there, and that's the safest place for him. So he wanted to do that. And I went on a couple tours, and he was like, oh yeah, it's almost like he thought we were at Disney World when we went there. I'm like, how could anybody that's 50 years old want to be in a long-term care facility? Like, we had just went on an 8,000-mile road trip. It was amazing. Now, of course, it was beautiful, but it killed me because of all the work of the 8,000. Like, again, people don't realize I did all the driving, all the planning, all the carrying, all the luggage, everything, So, but again, I still am grateful for being able to do that. So I always made the best of it. So we found a place for him to go. But for me, it was very difficult because I knew if he chose the opposite path, like most times, that I would have to deal with my grieving process of watching the decline. But if he chose the other path, that'd be great. And I'm like, okay, so I had a lot of crying, a lot of grieving. Now I called Myra during this time, but I don't know how much you remember clearly about that, Myra, but what did you feel like when I would call you trying to make the decision as to let go and let him go into the care facility to see if he even had a choice? What were your thoughts?
Well, the bottom line was, is it his choice or your choice? And
Yeah.
most of the time you were feeling like it was your choice, because you were the one that needed to decide what he needs. And I remember talking to you about that and saying, Kim, he's going to decide. He'll decide which way he wants to go. You have to focus on you for a change. And that's kind of where we went, was you have to decide what you're going to do for yourself, because you and your family are important. And I said to you, what happens if something happens to you?
Mhm.
Where is everybody else? Where are all the clients and all the students and your family? And where's he going to be if you're not there? So I remember having that conversation with you.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it was hard for me to accept. So that was about July of 2023. And so when we were in the neuropsychological psych's office after this decision, I just started crying, and she was like so worried about me that she wanted to get me caregiver support. I'm like, no, I have to grieve. It was kind of like what the psychiatrist I know would call anticipatory grief. I said, I have to accept it. And she goes, why are you assuming he's just going to decline? This might be great. You're going to be refreshed. You're going to be able to help him at the facility. He's going to have a whole team, PTOT. And these places cook decent food. So it's not just like garbage food they're getting. And I was like, she's right. Like, why am I assuming a decline? Then I'm part of the problem too. I should just really hand this over to him and God. And I did not realize for 8 years, I thought he was healing, but it was me giving him CPR all the time. And
Right.
I didn't realize he wasn't truly breathing and acting on his own. And I thought he had completely evolved and changed. But when we would go out somewhere and he could make a decision whether to eat and drink things that destroyed his body with MS and flared his symptom, he would make the opposite decision. And then he would blame it on me. Like if somebody asked him, oh, do you want a beer? Do you want this? Oh, she won't let me. I'm like, wait a minute. I was going to let you do what you choose. I said, your body doesn't let you. Or maybe like, and I need to get a little graphic here because some of you that are trying to make a decision are going through this. So if he chose to drink more coffee or like lattes or hot chocolates, which sounds so sad because like you want to have freedom, but when your body's been through so much destruction, it doesn't want more offenders. It doesn't want more injuries. And certain foods and drinks and things offend the body when it's in a sensitive state. So if he would eat like bread out, especially non-organic bread with glyphosate, or he had caffeine or he had alcohol, he would either have incontinence, bowel incontinence, urine incontinence, or a complete change in mood, like extremely violent, extreme change. When he was first healing and could actually drive, and I didn't know this, one time I had forgot my purse at his brother's house. And he literally just instantly did some crazy U-turn in the middle of the street without slowing down to go back and get my purse. He was irritated that I left it there. We were only like 15 minutes away. But I'd also realized that he had foods at the house gathering that weren't right for his brain. So there was it was always impulsive, very dangerous decision making. And because I'm so like, oh, it's going to be okay, and again, I'm not that hopelessly naive. It might sound like it, but I'm used to just surviving and fixing things. So anyway, when he would make a choice to eat or drink something, it would either set back all of his symptoms or I would be cleaning up the bowel incontinence, urine incontinence at hotels. I would be changing the sheets or trying to cover up that there was an accident. So this was literally full time, like trying to preventively put out fires. But it would be turned in when we were in public that Kim won't let me have this. And so I'd be like, no, I want you to have like a little bit of treats too. I know what that feels like when I was healing. So anyway, when he would make the choice to have the wrong thing, we would take a decline and have to recover from that. So I knew that that could happen if he went into a care facility. And in July of 23, we were planning his 50th birthday in September. So I said, look, John, before you try this inpatient facility or long-term care, can we just get through your birthday, go to Alaska? Because for his 50th, we were all going to Alaska and also celebrating one of my mother's birthdays. And his mom was there, his sister, and we had an amazing time. And as long as I was managing everything, he was doing great. But when we got back, I thought that that cruise would motivate him to like want to live even more. Because when we went to Iceland and he saw all this beautiful stuff, he got a little bit of motivation. But as soon as it was regular life, that all declined. So when we got back from the cruise, he actually got worse than he was before. He didn't want to he wanted to just watch TV constantly, not do anything for himself. And again, just me take care of everything. And not that I minded, but again, it was slowly chipping away at me and I wasn't actually saving him. So like for me, I'm all about putting my energy where you're actually going to get a return, where that person's going to get better in some way. But if I'm now creating more codependence or enabling or disabling him further, then I'm actually part of the problem. It only took 8-9 years for me to figure that out. so anyway, when I said, okay, so we have to research him going to the place further or me commit to it. So we got set up, and so that was September of 24, then I'm seeing by 23. And then by February of 24, he went into the long-term care facility based on his choice, the decision with the neuropsych eval. And then also for me at that time, I was in finishing LMT school. I was trying to get some more massage techniques to actually help him and a license that would allow me to help teach others on a deeper level. Well, that was finishing up and I started getting sick. I started getting some of my old symptoms back. And I was in bed one day, like needing to recover. And I was allowed 1 day to be in bed, like 1 day, because I can't be sick longer than a day, because who's going to get John food? Who's going to feed me? Who, like, again, my clients would show up, but many of them have their own lives and tragedies too that they're dealing with, that not everybody can bring me 3 to 4 organic meals and broth and orange juice every day to get me back. So I realized Kim, and Marlene knows, I called her. I was getting a couple symptoms that I might have to check on my lungs and then check on a growth that I was feeling in my throat. And I was like, what if I did get like stage 4 cancer and had to really focus on my healing? Or some of my old symptoms came back and I had to do the work I did before. How could I do that and caregive for John? Like, it was almost physically impossible. And so I realized that if I waited to allow him to go in till either I declined or he declined further, that I wouldn't be being a smart leader and not even a really good wife. And for me, what I work with a lot of people that are dealing with their loved ones with dementia or Alzheimer's. And I could see he was taking a decline. And one of the doctors asked me if he was diagnosed with that. I'm like, no, but I've noticed some different memory issues. And so I realized if I wait till he completely wasn't aware of his surroundings, that can happen as a side effect of MS too, that he would feel more scared if I put him into a new location, and it'd be so weird to go there and waiting to like a memory care unit. So I thought if he established now, while he was still somewhat with it, he could create friends and community in that long-term care facility. And what happens is a lot of us, when we're still all with it, we think that the patient, the client, the family member is suffering going into long-term care and that they know the difference. A lot of times their brain is so simple, it just adapts to wherever they're at. So when John would go there, it was almost like the rest of the world didn't exist anymore. Like, he could be there 10 weeks and he felt like he was there 2 weeks. Or now I have new friends and new family members to complain about while I'm here. And because John is very particular, it was very hard to get either in-home care or in-home entertainment, because there wasn't a lot of things he was interested in other than maybe cars, but he can't drive a car anymore. And we didn't have money just to buy new cars to give interest, right? So we made that decision for him to go in February of 2024. So this month is a year that he's been in long-term care. Now, Myra, in the past, have you dealt with anybody in your life or friends, family, that you felt like it was the right decision for long-term care, or things that you've seen like make smarter decisions, or any feedback you have for me based on everything I just spit out?
I've seen a lot, and I think your point earlier about having the test done, if you can have them tested and the person can see the results of those tests, they can understand that these people can't make those decisions. And
Right.
your point about building community, I've seen clients that take their mothers or their fathers or their spouses to long-term care, and they may not have dementia, but they do connect with the other people there because the other people there are like them. And if you find a good quality place like you happen to find, they will give them good food, they'll take care of them, they'll see to their every need, and they also stimulate them. They have activities that they can do. And it's not like PT coming in and making them do things they can't do. So it's very important, I think, and I've seen that quite a bit. And there is that grieving, and I think there needs to be support for the person making the decision. And one thing you did was really good, was a limited exposure. Let's see how this works. But you also have to have somebody supporting the person making the decision. And the worst thing is when you have a whole family trying to decide about somebody going in a facility. That's very difficult. So family meetings, we used to have family meetings with veterans when I worked at the VA. And we would have family meetings, and we would have one person in the room that would not agree with what was going on. And it was like the professionals in the room step up and let the family relax. And they explain to the family, to this one person, this is the best thing that can happen. So getting support for both sides, the person going in and the person's making the decision, is extremely important. But the testing is really important. If you can prove to them that they cognitively cannot do what you would like for them to do, and their safety and your safety is paramount at this point. So I think that helps to make those decisions. And I know Marlene and I both just trusted that you were going to make the right decision eventually. It was just
Yeah,
you're
eventually.
just going to have to do it. We just didn't want you to wait till it was too late. So
Yeah. And then Marlene, when I don't know if you can remember some of those additional calls over the last 2 years or so, but what was being laid on your heart during that time, or that does this bring back any thoughts that you want to offer to even people trying to make this decision?
Well, I think in your situation and many people, you feel like if you can turn yourself inside out and jump high enough and do enough, that, you saw him rebound. When I met you in 2018, he was there as a test subject and he was walking. So
Mhm.
look at how big of an advancement he had made if you did everything that you possibly could. And so just to reiterate all of that up until the point you are now and where you were a year ago, letting go is not giving up.
Mhm.
And that was probably the most difficult part for you to have to swallow. And that's where my heart always hurt for you. I wanted you to understand that you were not giving up on him.
Mhm.
You just had to let go to save yourself because you were going to take him and you down with it. So I'm glad that you
Yes.
made that decision.
No, I agree. And sometimes if you're the only advocate a person has, if you are taken out, they're left to like the state taking care of them. And
Yeah,
that's not great either. And sometimes people working for the
yeah.
state are not doing it for the right reasons. Sometimes they're just collecting an hourly paycheck and not
Mm,
making sure the person has what they need. So what somebody told me, especially the psychiatrist, is like, and one of the, I went to, so it's funny, I talked to the people that look at things more holistically and have been in the conventional world. And then I'll go to a conventional psychiatrist for feedback. And then also I had a counselor ask for feedback. And my counselor, she said, Kim, I had to do the same thing with my dad. And she goes, it was required because it was not safe for him. It wasn't safe for me. So, but she said, Kim, you're not just dump, because some people have a viewpoint that if they allow their family member to go into a care facility, that they're dumping them off at the pound. She goes, Kim, that's not you. You don't dump anybody off. You're going to make sure they're safe. You check on the blood work. Like, and I didn't think about this. The things that I do are so normal for me. I don't realize it's extra. Like most caregivers aren't checking on the labs every 4 weeks or checking on the thing. So for me, like I know all of his favorite little snacks that, and for him, because his mind is so simple, just bringing him like a candy bar, some, and again, organic soy-free candy bars and some Slim Jims or his little favorite things that are the better version, that makes him feel cared about and just making sure that he has what he needs and he's safe. And for him, yeah, he goes and plays bingo now. He does PTOT to the best of his ability. But as a whole, they had to explain to me that, Kim, you're not dumping him off and never checking on him. You're making sure
Yes,
that he's safe. And if you were dead, who would do that for him? Or if you're
right.
disabled, who's going to be able to do that? Because even though he has a lot of family, they have their own commitments that they're dealing with too, and their own concerns that they can't keep up with this. And because John is so particular, even people that knew him his whole life didn't sometimes knew the little things that would actually help keep him kind of up or motivated. But exactly what you said, Marlene, there was a point where he was walking again, but he didn't want to sustain it. So when he could, like, let's say, because the VA had built out his home for a disabled home, like wheelchair accessible, it was almost like they manifested that reality. But if he had a chair to sit in the shower, even if he could stand, he would sit in the chair. If he could stand to pee, he would sit on the toilet. If he could stand to brush his teeth, he would sit. And I'd say, John, if you just sit when you do things, when you can stand, those abilities
Mhm,
are not going to stay. He would get so mad at me when I would say that, like, who's going to get mad when you tell him to stand to pee as a guy? Like,
mhm,
and I have to be real about this because some of the clients or people listening are going to be dealing with this. So when someone just recently asked me about putting a loved one in a care facility, I said, okay, here's how I would make that decision. When the person has a choice to do right for themselves, do they do
Mhm.
the opposite, or do they do the same things you're trying to do for them? Is it only you that's giving them CPR and keeping them going? Or do you have to lecture them? Do they argue with you every time you try to get them to care for themselves? If
mhm,
their choice is opposite of God and nature, then yes, do you want to kill yourself or someone you can't save from themselves?
right.
Like me, I kept thinking I could prove how amazing the body is and the spirit is if we chose the God choice. And because I evolved, I thought anybody can evolve. But
Mhm,
as Myra's taught me in the past, not everybody wants that. And somebody told me when I very first started helping John, 9 years ago now, almost 10, that I was not going to fix this for him, that the pattern would repeat over and over until he either learns the lesson or until he passes over. And it is so crazy. He has declined 3 times very hard, and it's happened the same way. every single time. And he will feed into it, not knowingly. I think maybe injury, brain injury or a spiritual thing. For some reason, him and God have made a different agreement than I had with God.
Mhm.
And again, that might not resonate with everybody. So when he went into the care facility, I gave it to God and I said, okay, if he picks up the baton and he has a renewing of his heart and mind, whether it's spiritual, physical, whatever it is, then we'll know, okay, he could maybe be there 3 months and come back home.
Mhm.
So he got PTOT 6 days a week, home and again, it's still facility food, but much better than the average facility. Again, this is the only like 4.8 rated facility in the state of Florida. And so that's why I could even cope with this mentally. But as soon as he had the ability to choose whether to do things on his own, every night, what he started doing after about 2 weeks, he would call the nurses at night to put his own legs in bed. Like with him, his legs were a little bit rigid from being in the chair. So instead of him wanting to lift his legs, he asked them to put his legs in bed. Then he asked them for this medication. Then he started having coffee at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If he has 1 cup of coffee, he gets urinary incontinence. If he has 2 or 3, his brain shuts down. He gets a lithium deficiency. He gets a manic episode. So within 6 weeks, he was in a manic episode. I had a situation with a nurse there. Then he could not stop urinating, so they put him on a full-time catheter, and he couldn't stop urinating because he kept drinking coffee all the time. So if I told him anything to do, though, it was opposite. So I just kind of stopped by, gave treats, checked on him, messaged him, shipped him things from Amazon. And I realized that no, he really had not healed with his choices this whole time. It was literally all me carrying for 8 to 9 years. And that could have went on 2 more decades, but I wouldn't probably be here in those 2 decades. So anyway, in under 6 weeks, no, I shouldn't say, maybe let's just say under 12 weeks, he lost his full ability to transfer in and out of his chair, into a shower, into his bed. Even though he went to PTOT every day, he started using a Hoyer lift. He asked him to use a Hoyer lift to get him out of bed so that he wouldn't have to work to transfer. So he chose a complete opposite. And again, it could be just his brain, but I've met people that are fully competent that believe this every day. And I just had this session with a client the other day, and I told this story about John, and he was like, oh my gosh, Kim, that's me. I think the PT is going to fix me, and I go home and do the opposite, and I do everything to destroy my body. I'm like, right, you think because you clocked in at PT or with your personal trainer, you're going to get fit, you're going to lose weight, you're going to heal, but then you clock out as soon as you leave that office. Well, in John's mind, he always felt the practitioner was going to fix him, that he didn't have to do the fixing and that he could just chill the rest of the time. So sadly, about 4 months ago on one of our visits, he's like, Kim, I don't want to be here anymore. Will you just bring me home? And I said, John, I said, there's no way. I said, I can't even transfer you in and out of a car anymore. You're on a full-time catheter. We can't operate a Hoyer lift. I said, and now he's probably about 250 pounds, 6 foot tall. I'm like, there's no way I can even safely move you. Like, it's complete dead weight. Like, before he could help me some. And he asked for an electric chair right away so that he could zoom around easier. So every choice he made was opposite. And I told him, I'm not trying to like throw this in your face, but this is what I was saying before when I would ask you to please do the quadrupeds, to please sit on the edge of the bed. And even when the neuropsychologist said he might not be able to remember simple tasks, I had this big whiteboard. I put 3 pictures because you can't give more than like 2 to 4 exercises for someone in this mindset. I put 3 to 4 pictures on the whiteboard for him to just copy them when I was like cleaning the kitchen or cooking. And even that, looking, and I had all these motivational posts up because I believe the brain picks up, but none of that ever inspired him to do basic things. And so he's like, oh, that's why you asked me to do this. I said, yes, when I was saying that if you don't do X, you're going to lose Y or vice versa. That's all I was doing. I wasn't trying to tell you what to do, but this is what I was trying to prevent. Now again, he won't remember everything we just said, some of that he doesn't remember. But anyway, he's comfortable there now. He's made friends. They're taking good care of him. And again, even though he can't transfer himself, they're making sure he's getting breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He's still going to bingo because it's a veterans-based thing. They always have veterans-based activities going on. So there's some positives about that. And he sounded pretty good mentally the last time I saw him. So even though there's been a continued physical decline, which we expected, he's, accepted where he's at and just kind of doing what he's got to do. Now, with me saying that, Marlene or Myra, any feedback on that?
Well, a couple of things came up while you were talking. One of them is I've noticed in the belief change work that I do, and also working with people with hospice, sometimes they develop what's called, think of the word. I can't think of it right now, but anyway, they like the care they're getting and they don't want to lose that care. And so they will continue to go back to needing care because it fulfills some sort of subconscious need
Mm.
that they're never going to get well. They just won't get well because it's a secondary gain. That's what it is. It's secondary gain. Cancer patients, once they recover from cancer, they're sort of out in the open and there's nobody there to support them. And so they end up recreating cancer so they can go back, to get the care they need. So
Yeah.
that was one of the things. If I can think of the other one, I'll tell you.
Yeah, no, it'll come back. And that's the thing. Marlene and I were talking about the other day. She had a good friend that was dealing with a health crisis. And, Marlene's like me. She wants to save them and bring them goodies to help them heal. But this person's ready to exit too. They don't want extra help in healing. And so and it kind of made Marlene a little bit mad. And so I was explaining to her at this point, if somebody's choosing opposite, we just gonna honor their journey, because otherwise it's going to destroy both of us. And we're going to be arguing with them before they pass over. And if we're seeing the actions, let's say the person says they want to live, but the actions don't match what they're saying, then we just need to accept that. And we can, give love and send good energy and pray for them. But we also have to make sure we're saving ourselves, because I value all of this. But if I can't put myself first, because I'm constantly giving someone else CPR, I'm not going to look like I value it either. And it's still unhealthy. It's almost like an addiction of saving somebody else over yourself and deflecting from doing your own self-work while you're trying to help someone else rise. But Marlene, what did you feel about that when we made the decision to just like appreciate your friend for where they were at, but not try to save them?
It was a lifesaver for me because I was still, still jumping through the hoops, still thinking that I could help change the mindset. But she had just lost her husband, so she was still in that big, deep grieving process and I told her after we talked, I said, you have every right to be sad, mad, angry, everything that you're feeling. So I just gave in to letting her feel what she needed to feel instead of trying to say anything motivational, like, just every day, just get this much better. I just kind of let her be where she wanted to be. Because as you were talking before, I just get the reminder that water follows the path of the least resistance. And, your journey in this whole process with your husband, think about everything you've learned. Look at the inspiration you are for everyone else now that you can help teach. Every lesson that you're learning, you're now teaching everyone else. That's the biggest gift of all. And so,
Yeah, I was so
yeah,
grateful for what we had learned together, because
yeah.
really it helped me so much with learning how to help someone in a mental health crisis, how to keep yourself safe,
Mhm,
how to keep them safe, how not to make decisions just off emotion, but logic. Um,
mhm,
and what's the best possible decision, even though no decision feels good, like what's the optimal, the suboptimal decision, and how long are you going to deal with suboptimal until optimal becomes your reality?
yeah.
But no, I agree with you, and I'm grateful that John is safe and has a place where, again, the work I was doing of 25 people, I'm glad those 25 people are now helping him, and I can just come and support and visit and get what he needs and make sure
Mhm,
he's safe. And then I can keep myself alive and actually, when I'm with my girls, have quality time with my girls, or actually get
yes.
some downtime. And then, just a month and a half, 2 months after he was placed, all this unique stuff came up in Egypt that was never on my radar.
Mhm,
And I would not be able to fulfill some certain obedience I needed to do for this calling over the last year. I would not have been able to leave John. I would have had to turn down a lot of things. And again, if it was helping John and we were doing the right thing, I could give up anything. I'm okay with that. But I was hurting John and hurting myself. And
mhm,
so being in my 40s, was I going to end my entire life in my 40s to save someone that didn't really want to be saved? And
right.
what Myra was talking about, that secondary gain, what I was trying to always think, okay, maybe because he was the seventh, he was the baby of the family. Maybe because he watched his mom when she was older be retired and submit to the husband, that he thought that I was like in my 60s or 70s, and that maybe that's what he wanted to see me do. Or maybe he wanted to just be babied like the seventh baby in the family. And that's why he wanted to be taken care of. And if he got better, that he wouldn't, get that. And I used to tell him all the time, if you heal, I promise I'll still take care of you. I'll still nurture you. I'll still do whatever, like all the things I've done to spoil you. If you heal, I'll still do it. Don't think that you have to stay this way to get nurtured, you know? And then one time he literally yelled at me that if it wasn't for me, he could be dead by now and he'd be grateful. And so that I forced him to stay here. Now he was the one that asked me, but he screamed it at me one time that it was my fault he was still there and that I saved him. If I would have just let him go, he could be at peace already. And so it's tough that no matter how good you do, and those of you that are caregivers, don't take this stuff personal. You'll be like, oh my gosh, I went to the ends of the earth for this person and they're still hateful to me. You're the main one they're going to take it out on. And
Yeah.
many of the people you're caregiving for don't even know how to give themselves love. So please don't expect them to know how to give you love and compassion or empathy. And they're dealing with so many, if they are cognitive, they're dealing with so many emotions of what they've lost. They also feel like a burden to you. So they're going to get angry sometimes. So there's just try not to take the process personal. Find a support team to talk to, anybody that you need, a holistic person, alternative therapy, a good friend that you can trust, psychiatrist, psychologist, get people on your team. But again, people that really are a little bit more thoughtful, not people that just spit out textbook or because you're not going to be able to listen to them or feel supported effectively if it's just spitting out textbook academia, right? So just find a good team. And if you need help with that too, you can reach out to our international wellness team. Our international wellness team, we have so many amazingly, like 40 people on our team. Like Myra and Marlene are both on our team. Myra, again, is a nurse practitioner that has studied so many amazing things on the holistic level. Marlene is a licensed massage therapist, Reiki certified. And again, she's been through her own journey and she's like Mama Marlene, and everybody needs a Mama Marlene. But we have, again, physical therapists, personal trainers, licensed mental health counselors on our team that could help you get a different perspective and help you assess, is it the right time to put someone in a long-term care facility, or is it maybe too soon? And even something I've had to talk about for John is, when is the right time to call in hospice? Because sometimes if you wait too long to call in hospice and you don't have their support, a lot of mistakes can happen that really make the transition part much more difficult on the patient and the family. And that's the other thing that Myra's helped me with a lot is if you call in hospice for guidance or counseling, that doesn't mean they're dying tomorrow. It means you're being proactive to get that education and strategies from the experts that deal with it all the time versus waiting. Like my grandmother, we thought we could wait till right to the end. We called them the last 2 weeks of her life. And then guess what? Hospice was short staffed. It was hard to get people to the house in time. We didn't have the bed in time. We didn't have the medication in time. Had I called in hospice a little bit sooner to get on their book, so to speak, they could have guided us on how to do that much more effectively versus like scrambling right at the end. Now, Myra, with it, all that I said with that, any other feedback you have in reference to that?
Well, a couple of things. One thing I wanted to say, when you're part of a family making a decision about placement, often the mistake I see is they point fingers, like I've done this and you haven't done anything. Well, realize that not everybody has the same gifts, and people who caregive have a gift, but people who are CPAs or who are lawyers or who are doctors, they don't have the same gifts. So they're not going to be able to provide the kind of care. And so the worst thing you can do is point fingers at each other and say, well, I did all this and you need to do this, because they may not be capable. So you just make the decisions, and what you said is really important. You get a good group together to support the family and to support you in making these decisions. And as far as hospice goes, you can never call hospice too soon. And that's one of the biggest mistakes, because they're the ones that's going to decide if the person's ready or not. You don't have to wait. Whenever you want to get more information, there's just a great avenue to support the decisions that are made. They've got all the skills, they've got all the experience, and you can shop around, call 2 or 3 and see which one you like best and just get the information from them. They'll help you make the decisions. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Myron. What you said about family making decision. Now, luckily, because John's family is very familiar with the history of John's care and they know how intense it has been, we were all on the same page. But my brother-in-law at one time, when he was going through a caregiving situation with his brother, a lot of people had opinions on how they should caregive for the person. And he's like, all the opinions are from the people doing none of the work. So that's the other thing I want to share with you. If you are the caregiver, and you're trying to make the decision to save yourself and to still be there for the person you're caregiving for, somebody else in the family that is doing absolutely nothing to help may give their opinion on how bad you are by putting them in there or make you feel guilty, yet they're not able or willing to do the work to take anything off your plate, maybe not even stay there a weekend to help give you a break.
Right.
I know it's tough, but you have to block them out. I used to take opinions of people that were doing nothing very seriously. And then I realized, wait a minute, do I want to be like that person? Is that person doing anything that I'm doing? Why am I allowing that person to rent so much space in my decision making versus listening to the professionals and listening to the other caregivers and listening to the people that actually take care of people all the time? So I want you, if your gut and your professional research has told you that it's time for someone to go into a care facility, even if that person does not want to go in, but their choices are opposite of healing and it's unsafe to keep them home, it is much better to bring them there. And what I've seen with my other clients that have put their family in caregiving situations, I would go, or long-term care facilities, I would go visit my client's family member in the long-term care facility. They would know everybody's name in the facility. It was like they were the new kid on the block, and they would tell me everything that's going on. And they'd act like they had this happy life. If the family member came to visit, they would be like, oh, I hate it here. I need you to take me out. They would literally change and make that family member feel so guilty, like they were miserable. I'm like, wait a minute. I was just there 2 days ago, and they were like joshing with me, like they were like, they knew the whole community newsletter. I said, and it's so weird how the psyche works that even, and again, when we get older, we tend to turn into kids again. They know how to manipulate mom or dad, so to speak, on what they want. And again, if it was safe to be at home and it was good, that's not a bad decision. But if it's unsafe for everybody, we're not making the logical choice to bring them back home. And as we talked about before, the right decision doesn't always feel good, but it's often the right decision, right? Are there any last words that you guys want to share before we sign off? Anything from you, Marlene?
Well, thank you for sharing. That's the biggest thing. That's got to be so difficult to even go back and process and talk about it. So I admire you again just for always being so open and able to. The long-term effect is helping everyone go through all of these processes. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And then Myra, any final words for anybody listening? Or
It's a tough decision. It's always a tough decision.
Yeah.
But you have to be comfortable in your own decisions in your own life. And if
Mhm.
you're having problems with it, get some help, find out why. But think about the person. And what you said about being the kid, they really become children again.
Yeah.
You have to make the decisions for them. They can't make those decisions. So,
Right. No, and you're right. And that's the biggest thing is find somebody that can work you through it, that you trust. Don't try to do this all alone. You don't have to be alone. You don't have to be embarrassed about the decision. And again, I find that you can make all decisions to please everybody else, but half the time when you're in your dying process, those people don't even show up.
they're not gonna be there.
That's one thing is you don't always earn brownie points by putting other people first, you know? Well, thank you all for being here today. I hope this helps
Thank
someone
you.
listening, and I look forward to being with you guys on the next Healing with Excellence podcast. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.